more radical strategy would be more effective, just on the independence vote?
There's two sides to your question. First thing I want to touch on is I think Yes Scotland has been a considerable success. I mean, the SSP are delighted to be part of it. I mean, it's been a success in virtually every measure. The Scottish Socialist Party, the Greens and the SNP have worked together constructively, well, not just, by the way, in the last year since Yes Scotland was launched, but in 2005, the Scottish Independence Convention was launched. And those three parties were the founding parties, as well as individuals across Civic Scotland. And it's been a considered success, not least of all because, as you highlight in your second part of the question, is these are three parties that don't agree with one another. The SSP is a profoundly and clearly anti-capitalist party.
Splitter!
Yeah, the SNP, you know, they'd be on here, and I'm sure you'll speak to them in due course. They're a capitalist party. They're happy with the free market. They'd probably talk about a mixed economy, public sector, private sector, etc. Look, I respect that. That's their view. That's their ideology. I don't share it, but I respect it. Similarly, with our partners in the Greens, they're environmentalists. They're not a anti-capitalist party per se. There's a lot of their policies we share, but you know, these in politics are often grounds for fracturing. Wasn't it William McIlvanney, or Hugh McIlvanney, I think it's William, who said in politics in Scotland there's nothing so divisive as a call for unity? Well, you know, these three parties united 6 years ago and we've remained united. We're on good speaking terms. We have lots of differences, but we share an almighty goal together, which is transforming this country and achieving independence. And that's, to quote Martin Luther King, we've kept our eyes on the prize. In many ways, that's more important than the things that might divide us. On the SNP, well, you're right, you put your finger on it. The SNP are under enormous pressure, and in many ways they've capitulated to that pressure. You know, they abandoned their policy of a independent Scotland being non-NATO last year, which I think was a retrograde step. They're talking about, Alex Salmond talks openly about reducing corporation tax in Scotland to pennies, which is just not my cup of tea at all, to put it mildly. I think it's a nonsense. Inviting companies like Amazon and Starbucks and Google and all the rest of them to come here, employ people in buttons, no pay any taxes, that's an affront to, you know, decency and this sense of fair play and justice and that. So I've got many differences with the SNP, but I have to say that I've enjoyed working with them this last year. They're respectful of the SSP and they know what the SSP brings to the Yes Scotland campaign, as do the Greens. Added together, you get more than just adding the three of us together. You get, you know, that phrase about more than the sum of the parts. Mm-hmm. Because of that unity, that's what people want to see. They want to see people who share a common set of ideas working together with one another rather than knocking nine bells at each other. And so in the last year, the Bitter Together campaign of the Tories and Labour have tried to, on every occasion, say, oh, look, the SSP don't agree with the SNP and the Greens don't agree with the SNP. And they've tried mightily, and I think the general public are far more clever than they would give them credit for. And they said, yeah, we know they're not the same party, you mugs, we'll work that out for ourselves, but they share a common goal of independence, and that's fine. Which is, you know, so for our differences, yeah, they're there, we're respectful of them, we debate them out with candid frankness, nobody's trying to keep these things a secret, but the project's been a success. I mean, there's now 375,000 people signed this declaration for independence, and we have a target of getting 1 million by this time next year. And there's more than 1,000, I think it's 1,100 different local yes campaigns across the length and breadth of Scotland. That's fantastic. I mean, Better Together didn't even try to get down that path, you know, in the No campaign, because it would have been a farce. You can't get the Labour Party and the Tories to be in the same city as one another, far less the same weak village hall, you know what I mean?
There's been suggestions that Better Together have been basically copying the strategy of the Yes campaign so far, like after Yes campaign started setting up their local groups and doing it that way, then Better Together started to sort of do the same thing. And there's been suggestions that they're following the same kind of strategy, but just copying, basically.
No, I don't think that's true, actually. I know what people are driving at, right? But see, when you consider the launch that Yes Scotland had, you know, we booked the Cine World in Edinburgh's Fountain Bridge. It was big, it was glitzy, there was Brian Cox there, Martin Compston. I was in my element. I've seen Sweet 16. I enjoyed seeing all these movies and so on, seeing the actors in the flesh, so to speak. Right, it was a big, dramatic blast onto the scene. It's almost like we're here, we're queer, get used to it. It's right, well, we're here, we're yes, get used to it. We're not going to be any kind of lilting violet in the corner. Whereas the Better Together campaign, rightly, in my view, avoided that. They had a meeting at the university, Napier University, is much more low-key. Because for them, I think they're clever. Alistair Darling and all that. I mean, I stood against him in the 2010 general election in Edinburgh South West. He's clever. I'm not going to underestimate the guy. I'm not going to ask for a quarter to be given because somehow we think we deserve it, right? They're fighting for their lives. They're determined, they're as determined to keep the union as we are to achieve independence. So they're clever, and I won't have anybody underestimating them. But their strategy has to be entirely different from us because they know you can't, in any circumstance, suggest that the word no is as inspiring as the word yes. They're trying to keep the status quo, when the status quo for people is the bedroom tax, a falling standard of living, increasing misery for another 7 years. They know it's difficult to sell that. So their strategy won't be the same as ours, which is rightly passionate as well as rational, logical as well as coherent, and ultimately more convincing.
I think we should always do that kind of no when you say it. You should say it in this kind of Ian Paisley accent.
No, never. Is that the accent you're looking for?
Okay.
I mean, they do, don't they? I mean, John McCallion, who's been very active in the campaign, and he's been saying he's been keeping a clippings file of, the No campaign put up a press release, and it's chaos, terrify. It's all these words. A non-stop gloom, doom-mongering scenario. Do you know what I mean? So it's never, no change. Everything's going to be terrible, kind of thing. And I don't think that's working effectively. I think their great disadvantage, or what their main worry about, and I speak to a lot of people in the unions who know their campaign, is they're terrified that if the polls suddenly changed, they can't get the momentum back. That's the great thing. If you're ahead in the polls for a long time, it's inevitable that your ranks become complacent. That you don't have that hunger because you think this is fine. We just keep going like that. As soon as they go behind in the polls, then you find, oh my God, you're trying to cycle a bike that's lost its chain, and you're just pedaling faster and faster and faster and getting nowhere. So I think if the polls change fairly soon, then that campaign will have enormous problems with momentum.
Yeah, I also think people, if you keep telling them no, eventually people go, I saw it. No, yes, saw it.
It's like I was speaking at a meeting in Morningside last Friday night, Friday night, 7:30, there's 250, 300 people there in the Columcille Centre. By the way, I started my remarks by saying, have you no pubs to go to? Anyway, but the point I was making there is the No campaign keeps shouting, it's the wolf, it's the wolf, it's the wolf. You know what I mean? It's the wolf, your pension's going to be taken away. It's the wolf, your currency will be taken away. It's the wolf, you'll be in poverty. It's the wolf, the price of oil will fall down the pan, It's the wolf, it's the wolf, it's the wolf. And then I made the mistake of swearing. And I say, where is the fucking wolf? In other words, people saying, you keep saying it's got to be terrible. Everyone's terrible, terrible, terrible. And then when it doesn't materialise, the wolf doesn't show up, people go, do you know what? You're just a one-trick pony. You keep saying there's no good in this. And it's obvious that we would be better off. We wouldn't have a Tory government. We wouldn't have the bedroom tax. We'd have a higher standard of living. We'd have a health service that wasn't being privatised. We wouldn't be sending our young laddies leaving Liberton High School this summer to war far away for British imperialism. Do you know what I mean? So
you could also say that the wolf actually is Westminster and we're already in its jaws, and that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. The wolf is another 7 years of this recession. Another 7 years of a worsening standard of living. I think people will wise up to that.
Yeah, and okay, I think we'll have two more little questions and then it's time to finish up. So, first one is, how do you think this campaign is going to be won? Because a lot of people would suggest that by begging the media to be fair, which certainly hasn't happened so far, a lot of people would suggest that's not maybe the best strategy, although I think a certain amount of pressure should be applied at all times. Yeah. But do you think this is going to be one on the airwaves or this is going to be one on the doorstep?
No, begging the media to be fair, waste of time, don't even bother trying. Don't insult yourself by begging these people. I mean, at that meeting in Morningside last Friday that I mentioned, people were saying, how are we going to get the BBC to come out and support our case and do our case justice, And I said, the BBC are part of the British establishment. They're one of the fiercest opponents of independence. Forget the BBC. And as you rightly say, don't forget it to the extent that you just let them pipe out any old crap. You fight your corner. You fight to get your coverage. It's a democracy. You're entitled to it. But don't expect them to come round. And the point I made in passing, Michael, which I think is also valid, the BBC's standing in the eyes of the population across Britain has never been at a lower level. Remember, this is the corporation that covered up Savile. This is the corporation that were implicated in the Liveson inquiry, about the journalism standards in Britain. This is the BBC that were caught with their hands in the till during the Iraq War. So, I know the BBC is powerful, but I don't for a second think that the BBC is an institution universally loved and respected across Britain for lucid, truthful reporting and conduct that's of the highest possible standards. But that's besides the point.
No matter what they tell themselves.
Yeah, and the many awards they give themselves and big fat salaries to director generals and to Jonathan Ross and the rest of it squandering our money. But that's besides the point. That the key to this campaign is talking to people and using the argument persuasively where on the doorsteps, in the pubs, at the football grounds, in the hairdressers, in the shopping centres, at tea in the park, at the Edinburgh Festival. In other words, wherever the majority of the population gather in big numbers and smaller places, yes, Scotland is there. You've got a very powerful argument to put. Have faith in it. Have faith in the people who are listening to understand its coherent, logical attractiveness. There's no reason to panic just because we're at 35% in the polls. There's every reason to keep maintaining, keep your eyes on the prize, keep presenting the argument, put faith in people's ability to judge it and compare it with their deteriorating standard of living. I'm not in the least complacent. I think we've a hard job to do in the next 16 or 17 months, but I'm very optimistic, very confident because, one of the things I've learned in 35 years is to look at the ruins, look at the way the wind is blowing, look at the way people's opinions are formed and how they're being changed and their main worries that they have. Those worries coincide with what the independence campaign message has to offer them for progress and improving their lives, the lives of their kids, the lives of their parents who are getting elderly. And we've a profoundly coherent, positive and powerful case. And, I think if we maintain that, put forward clarity and be passion and belief, then we'll win.
Okay, and then the last question, just to sort of take the party hat off for a minute. Well, I'm not in a party, but I mean you. So
I don't wear a hat very much, but anyway, carry on.
We said at the start, it's in the DNA of the party, the Scottish Socialist Party, to support independence. But I just wondered if there was any kind of reasons that attracted you personally to the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I've been asked this question many times. I've thought about it. Where I was born, I had no control over. It wasn't my decision to be born in Motherwell way back then, But it happens to be the case I was born here. And I think, I'm Scottish. I'm proud of being Scottish. I think if I was born in Malawi, I would probably be proud of being Malawi or Brazilian. But I think for me, I want Scotland to be the best place in the world. The best country in the world. Our best country in the world, which means that we welcome people from abroad. We're at comfort with ourselves, we're at comfort with our relationship with each other and our comfort with our relationship with the peoples all over the world. This thing I think is probably prevalent in my mind just now because one of the things that's been discussed in Britain, as you know, is about immigration and the putrid agenda that's coming out of Westminster. It really sickens me, this thing that foreigners should be treated as sort of your enemy or with disrespect or suspicion or they're here to take the dole or that kind of thing, It horrifies me, it sickens me, because the truth is, in Scotland's history, we should know better than virtually anybody in the world that's a brave and honourable thing to uproot yourself and your family and go to the other end of the world in search of work, in search of making a better life for yourself. And I know my history, my relatives came here from Ireland. Other, friends and family of yours and mine came to the Central Belt from the Highlands, and then they went to Canada, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, all over the world. And I want Scotland to be a country that people come to, enjoy meeting us, don't feel threatened that we're going to nuke them or invade their country. They come here, we enjoy a kind of humanitarian internationalism that's embedded in everybody's DNA. And that's a marvellous thing to achieve. I think Scotland we've achieved a great deal and contributed and given to the world, and I think